My name is Kevin Jacob. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting this afternoon in Abingdon. I'm going to, just firstly to confirm that all the leaders and members of the committee are present in person at Abingdon. And then my first duty is to seek a chair for the 2025-2026 year. Can I seek any nomination?
I'd like to nominate Councillor David Roy.
Okay, and second everyone?
I'll second.
Any other nominations? If that's the case, I'll just ask members to affirm it by a show of hands. Okay. Well, thank you very much, then, Councillor Riang. I'll see you.
Thank you. And my first duty as chair is apparently to tell everyone to speak up, because otherwise people online can't hear. I'd like to thank Councillor Lethman, who's been our chair for the previous period and led us through the end of FOP and the beginning of this new committee. So thank you, Liz, for doing that. I'd like to seek nominations now for a vice chair. Can I see any nominations? Councillor Graham.
I'd like to propose Councillor Becky Thomas.
And do I have a second for that? Thank you, Councillor McLean. Are there any other nominations? In which case, can I see who agrees with that? Does everyone agree?
Yeah.
That's everyone. Consider yourself elected. Thank you. If we can move on to apologies for absence. Kevin, have we?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we've received an apology for absence from Councillor David Hingley, who is substituted by Councillor Lee, who is present. No other apologies.
Thank you for that. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything that they would like to declare at this stage? No, I think it's unlikely looking at the agenda, but you never know. If anything occurs to anyone during the course of the meeting, speak up at that point. Chair's announcements. First of all, to welcome everyone to this meeting of Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee. Members of the partnership and supporting officers are present both physically in the room and remotely. Can I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed? Meeting chat should only be used for messages about speaking and technical issues. No private side discussions going on, please. But please do use the raise hand function if you wish to speak. I suppose if you're in the room, the raise hand function is raising your hand. Could everyone, I encourage everyone online, please, to make sure your microphones are off and you're fully muted unless speaking. And when speaking, please give your name and the organisation that you're representing. Some people want to attend meetings here, so if the fire alarm goes off that we're not expecting, we go out of those doors, turn right, and along that corridor there's a fire exit on the left hand side. Follow me, I'll be moving quickly. Moving on to item 3, which is minutes of the POP meeting held on the 28th of January. Does anyone have any issues as to the accuracy, or can I sign them? Do I need formal proposal and seconding?
Affirmation would be fine.
With a hearty cheer? Those in favour?
Yeah.
Yes. Item 4 is public participation. We don't have anyone registered to speak, I understand. But we have one question, Mr. Inspector.
Yes, Chair, we have received one question from Leave Not Breed Oxfordshire, and they are not present, not able to make the meeting in person or online. So my suggestion there is subject to your discussion, and you send a written answer.
So the question has been posted online.
It
As
has,
part of
yeah.
the papers for this meeting, and we'll post the reply.
We'll post the reply online as well.
Okay, so that's all in hand. Moving on to item 5, which is the progress update on the implementation of the climate change adaptation route map for Oxfordshire. I'm sure there's an acronym, and they're just crying to get out. And I'd like to welcome Tom Lazell and Ariane Crampton, who are going to present this. Would you like to say what your role is?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So,
If
Ariane,
you could speak up, please.
Ariane Crampton, Climate Policy and Partnerships Manager at Oxfordshire County Council.
Tom Lazell, Climate Adaptation Lead at Oxfordshire County Council.
Okay. We're in your hands then.
Thank you. So, Kevin's just sharing some slides. This is an item which was requested back in the January meeting. The climate adaptation route map was adopted at that meeting, and leaders wanted to see a progress update sooner rather than later. So this is that progress update, and it's really being presented on behalf of all the sustainability leads of all the councils. So the report was put together with input from all councils, and you'll see at the end, I've got a little bit of an overview of what each council is doing, so you can all speak to that and share your progress. So next slide, please, Kevin. You've seen this slide before, but this is just a reminder of how climate change is impacting Oxfordshire. It's already having significant impacts in terms, in particular, of flooding, but also storms, cold snaps, heat waves and droughts. And we got some stats there about some of the recent events that have happened. So in 2022, there were 65 excess deaths across Oxfordshire because of heat. There was a new temperature record that year as well of over 38 degrees. We've got severe water stress forecast in Oxfordshire by 2040. And last September was the wettest month in Oxford since 1774. So climate impacts are clearly being felt. Next slide, please.
So Ariana said that she's happy to take questions as we go along. So if you want to wave, if you have anything that you want to say.
Yeah, and then we've also modelled the economic impacts of climate change across the county. And what this slide shows is that even in the best case scenario, which is the top line, the light blue line, where our emissions are reduced really quickly, we will still be seeing a contraction of GDP by 3.5% by 2070. And the worst case scenario is 6.5% of GDP. So a massive impact on the economy. And the really interesting thing to note there is that all the lines are very close together up to 2040, which basically means that we're locked into these economic impacts, whichever emissions pathway we end up in. We are still going to see those impacts. So we absolutely need to prepare now, because 2040 is actually not very far away in terms of infrastructure. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the adaptation route map was a partnership document. It was put together with many stakeholders across the county, and it has a very broad scope. So it covers infrastructure, natural environment, health, communities and built environment, business and industry, but also enabling actions. And actually the initial focus is really on the 15 priority actions, which are mainly enabling actions, which will underpin all the work that needs to happen and drive everything forward. Next slide, please. So the key progress against the route map itself, one of the key things that the commitments that's in there was about holding an adaptation summit. So that was held in March 2025 and was really, really well attended by a range of stakeholders. And we used that workshop to upskill the people who were there around using risk management techniques to embed climate resilience within their own organisations. And it was also an opportunity to bring together representatives from community groups with the joint Oxfordshire resilience team who deal with things like flooding events. And the great thing that came out of that event was that there's an agreement now that JORT are going to train up community groups to develop their community resilience planning. So they're the ones who are on the ground, who know what the issues are, who know which areas get flooded, which properties are vulnerable, and they can then help with putting together those plans for their local communities. Another key request from January was to prepare a comms strategy on this. So I think Becky can maybe talk to that a bit more if you've got any questions, but we've done a bit of outline planning for that. Next slide, please. And we've set up a new working group. So under the auspices of the Zero Carbon Oxfordshire Partnership, we've now got an adaptation working group. I think it's really worth noting that Oxford Health are chairing it, so they are very engaged in this agenda. But it's also got key stakeholders like the Environment Agency, the LNP, and the CAG network, as well as all the councils on it. So the first meeting in April really looked at terms of reference, a performance monitoring framework, and just getting the group set up. And we've got another meeting planned the week after next. Next slide, please. We've got lots of other relevant progress to report. So, for example, the Oxrail strategy is going to be looking at reducing flooding and overheating risks to the railway network. We have the local nature recovery strategy, has lots of adaptation actions embedded within it, and that will be published this year. We've also got the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme, which is expected to start in 2026. The County Council has made a couple of commitments which should drive forward this agenda on cleaning every highway drainage gully by March, and also having 2 new flood officers to support community resilience. And as I mentioned, following the summit, we're engaging with communities and town and parish councils on adaptation as part of our climate engagement plan. The Local Nature Partnership is also working on this. So they've got an Oxford Nature Recovery Fund, which is going to enable farmers to deliver climate resilience measures, and that's going to be launched this week. Next slide, please. And in fact, they're going to be launching it at the 100 Together Green Finance Conference, which is on Thursday. So that's just a reminder for those of you who haven't signed up. There are still some spaces available. We'd love to see you there. And there will be a strong focus on adaptation finance as part of that day. So we have a whole panel discussion on it. We have some really good experts talking about how you finance this. It's not easy. And we really need to be tapping into the best minds here to try and find the best solutions for funding some of the stuff that we know needs to be funded, because without a doubt, it will pay for itself. You only have to see the economic impact if we don't do anything. But obviously, it's that return on investment and the model for investors that needs to be worked on. Other county council actions are that we have some school climate adaptation surveys in hand, and we plan to do more of those to work out which schools are, for example, overheating or vulnerable to flooding and what can be done about that. We're going to be reviewing our resilient highways network for enhanced maintenance on any areas that are particularly impacted by climate impacts. We have our business continuity plans in place, which is one of the key actions really for any kind of resilience. And then we've also got a new project, a new research project with Oxford Brookes, which is on net zero heat and extreme heat. Sorry, net zero health and extreme heat. It's called HALF, and it's looking at how we support communities most vulnerable to extreme heat. So that's an exciting 5-year project that's just kicking off. And then finally, in terms of the overview in the report, there are some district council actions that are listed in there. So I think rather than talking to those, I think maybe I'll hand back to the chair, and yeah, you may want to bring out your own actions.
Are there any questions on what we've said so far?
Not a question, but just to reinforce what Ariane was saying just now about the 100 Together meeting that's happening this week, just to encourage people to come along. And I would also like to say that one of the things I'm most proud of is that last week, I think we were rated as the best county in the country for the work that we're doing on climate change, and particularly climate adaptation. So I think anything we can do to sort of push that agenda forward will not only be helping us, but actually will be leading the way for other councils around the country as well. So I urge you to come along if you can.
Councillor Thomas first.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to say, I think you have to cough if you want me to speak up. I just want to say thank you. I did attend the workshop back in March, and I found it really useful to get my head around all of the different concepts that we have to understand to come to terms with how we need to provide services with climate adaptation in mind. And it was very useful. Just on a local level, you can just apply it to your patch, and you can understand your district or even smaller hyper-local. So thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on what Liz was saying, really, about models of good practice and templates for other councils, because it's no good just us as Oxfordshire, although it's great that we are top of the league, and Oxfordshire district councils as well are very much in the top 10 according to the scorecard. But a scorecard in itself is no good, because what it shows is those that are doing well and those that are doing abominably, and what we need to do is even it up. And what I was wondering was how we're going to progress the modelling so it really does have a knock-on impact elsewhere. How do we set up the model that we can then utilise? And my suggestion is through things like the district council network could be one of those means of doing it. But I think we need to put a proposal forward that says, look, we have actually been a model of good practice in the particular areas of, and we can state that very clearly. And if we are proponents of moving that forward, we should actually set up some sort of mechanism which enables those templates to be followed through, so that those that are struggling, shall we say, or need more help and support, why waste what we've done with the expertise if we're not going to follow it through? So what I think is something that we need to follow through.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I can do. So we are trying to share what we're doing, and in fact we're speaking at a national network which is coordinated by the Local Government Association. There's a Sustainability Action Network taking place next month, where we are speaking about what we're doing on green finance, and we'll talk about adaptation finance as part of that. So we're trying to share what we're doing, but we will continue with that.
Just to add to that, I think our reputation on some of these areas of kind of strength is really kind of spreading at the moment. We've had a number of councils actually approach us over the last few months asking for kind of a steer and kind of get understanding what we're doing in more detail. So I think that's quite a positive sign. We've had kind of West Sussex, I think, one of the Welsh councils, kind of which one exactly, but and then 2 or 3 other ones over the last 6 months, which I think is a really positive sign.
Susan, next.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the fact that we're not asking questions at this point. We're kind of like more comments, but I was just going to say one of the purposes when we set up ZCOP was precisely to share best practice and to try and make sure that we were being as clear as possible in the way that we developed plans, that we were able to share them on websites and so on, so that they were useful how-to guides for people locally, but also, frankly, internationally, if we want to, because that's the general idea. Is we are quite pioneering in Oxford and Oxfordshire, and we've got to try and make sure that we are spreading good practice. I think we have got a good reputation collectively for doing that, and going around places like different local government networks, but also through other sorts of networks to talk about good practice. And I think we should continue to do that because it is helpful. And of course, we also, whenever we go to something like that, pick up other information from other people. So I think it's, we may be doing some good work, but there's still plenty to learn from others.
Liz, I've got a question.
Well, I'm just going to say UK 100, which I think most of us are members of, is a good place to be starting in terms of spreading the word. I don't know. I know the city is a member of UK 100, and so is the county. I'm not sure about the other councils.
We were, but I think we've dropped it for this. Well, I went to a conference and all the people there were people I used to work with.
But I think we did see this with them, perhaps, I don't know, but I think there is an opportunity, as Susan says, to spread the word and make it, we are leading the way on this, and I think we need to acknowledge that and recognise our position.
My question is around the really specifics, because what we're talking about now is sort of the top level and how, on average, things are there. But floods happen in a particular street rather than it being an overall thing. And for example, in my ward last winter, there were 2 streets that flooded. One which often does, and so they all know what the routine is, and one of them has sandbags in his garage and distributes them down the street, and everybody knows who to phone, and it's always a particular drain that's the problem, and we know the man who has to come and fix it. The other one is a street that never flooded before, and so there was no preparation at all, and they've upskilled rapidly since it happened. But is there a difference of approach? Is there something that we can prepare for the places that expect it? But is there something that we can do that is rapidly off the shelf? Here, these people are getting flooded for the first time. What do we say to that?
So yeah, I think engaging with those residents who've never been flooded or never had the impacts of another climate related event is kind of one of the most challenging things to do. So I think there's engagement and kind of increasing awareness is certainly one thing that we need to do. So let's say it's water flooding, for example, or kind of water coming out of the drains can happen anywhere in principle, because rainfall for a start is very unpredictable. So I think there's certainly an engagement piece. I think community resilience planning is quite an important aspect of that as well. So they, when residents can listen to a local person who is kind of trusted and so forth, is kind of a really important aspect of that. And then of course those residents who are already getting flooded, we need to kind of make sure that we're kind of supporting them as best we can so they're prepared for future flooding as well. So yes, I think there are different aspects. We're trying to pick them up through community resilience planning and kind of other aspects as well. And of course we have our flood risk team will be investigating many of those flooding instances as well.
Just 2 points. One, to pick up on what's follow on what you were saying, really, because we already have section 19, which actually applies for 5 properties or more, I think, that actually get a flood kit, which I think is a really useful idea. What isn't and needs to be followed up through the county council really is the follow on, because often it makes recommendations as a result of section 19, which have to be picked up by various agencies, including the county or the district, and it's timelining that work to ensure that, in answer to your question, that specific areas don't see it being repeated. The whole point of the flood kit is to actually support that resilience, but it's the agencies that have to follow it up that needs proper timelining. It's a bit missing at the moment, but the right approach is being taken. But going back to us as leaders in this group, I think we need to use this opportunity as a voice to government to say that we can, as a leading set of authorities, actually do the job of actually rolling out good practice in the following areas, and this will actually have the knock-on effect going forward. And I think there's something to be said about a mechanism to talk to government on this, and they are very open to talking about this as well. So I kind of feel that what they need to feel is that it's coming from bottom up, not from top down. We argue about top down is no good, but if we don't exercise what this is, which is good practice from bottom up, I think it's a voice to government, and they can actually therefore resource it so it does get rolled out. And then we've got outcomes nationwide, which will have far more impact as a result of good practice. So I kind of like to see that happening from this group, because we've actually got certainly significant, despite what Sue said, she's right, there are areas we can learn from. But what we have done, let's move it out there.
That's Susan, and then we'll move on to talk about the slide that's up there. Susan.
I was just going to put in a shameless plug for the Oxford Climate Awards, because you still have time to put in your nominations, closing on the 13th of July, and they'll happen in September. And there are a whole raft of categories. Please do look them up online.
Deliberate pun.
And plenty of different options for, you know, all sorts of organisations right across Oxfordshire, and they're a good fun event. But it's a really good way of doing exactly what Annie's talking about, celebrating good practice, and rewarding it as well.
The slide that we have up at the moment is saying what the district councils are doing, and how we're working adaptation into our general planning. To give you a chance to think, if I go first, it says there that South Vale isn't one council, by the way. But it said we do have an annual review of our nature climate action plan. We also at South Scrutiny last night had our 1 year plan, and we'll remind you what it's called. Annual delivery plan, and that had several items in there which are things to be done this year, as part of moving towards our 4 year plan. And also our local plan, which we're doing jointly with them, includes items within the planning system as to plan for adaptation, resilience. There are limits when you identify somewhere where you're going to go. Bethia, would you like to go next?
I would thank you, David, since you have spoken on behalf of us already. And I just wanted to say, yeah, I acknowledge that there's been a lot of progress in our planning for adaptation, and that initially, I think for a long time, climate adaptation was sort of frowned upon because people did not want to recognise that it was something that we did have to plan for. So this is why this is so welcome now, that we are actually taking action and putting this into practice. And so, yeah, I'm very happy that about the joint local plan and our annual delivery plans and including adaptation.
The negative side of saying adaptation is that you're resigning yourself to the fact that climate change is happening. So I think we've all got to that stage now. Would anyone else like to talk about where they're at as Susan?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that is correct, but it's a kind of a de minimis version of what we're actually doing. So we're also obviously taking account of it in actual developments that we're putting forward as a council, trying to make sure that it's taken into account in planning applications, certain part of our local plan process. It's also being part of our city centre action plan. And our economic strategy, the flood alleviation plan scheme for Oxfordshire is obviously, by definition, really one of the actions that we're taking to actually adapt to climate change. And I think there's always more we can do, but I do think that we're actually doing it through pretty much everything we're doing at the moment, and it has become a huge focus because it has had to be.
Anyone else?
I need to actually, if I can, just reiterate what Susan was saying, that it's a sort of a small headline, if you like. But one of the things we invested in was to ensure that we had more capacity within our officer structure, because without it, you actually can be constrained by your officer sort of core, if you like. And I think we invested a lot more with climate management. About 3 posts we've actually invested in order to develop that capacity. Of course, we've kind of got top cost. So our guard village section not only is proposing net zero. That really means to say we shouldn't have to adapt so much in the sense of having to put things right that clearly weren't dealt with in the past. We're setting it up there and then, and the highest standard is what you go for. This isn't something you can bargain away. It's something that you have to do and commit to. But there's just more creative ways of doing it. If you're doing it in partnership. So I kind of think we're certainly way on the way on the path.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, very similar to everybody else's story, we're obviously including the adaptations that we're bringing forward in the local plan. We have a climate action plan like yourselves. We've got some climate actions within our ADP as well, which will be taken forward over the next few years. As Andy said, we're in the process of bolstering our flood resilience team to ensure that we've got some extra bandwidth in relation to what is happening on the ground and also what is likely to come forward in the future. But building that into the ongoing programme as a standard rather than it being an exception. And I think that's something that we need to probably all look forward to.
An important point about resourcing, because you tend to need all the resources on the same night. Something particularly we found this way downriver. By the time people are phoning up the fire brigade, fire and rescue, quite often it's already committed further upriver where floods happened half an hour ago or an hour ago. So yeah, important to think about our own resourcing. So a plan without resources is just a dream, isn't it? Okay, as if we've got nothing else to add, anything you'd like to say in summary? All been said. Thank you very much. And no doubt we will come back to this. Future meeting.
Can I just add, if you can't come yourselves on, but it's Thursday, isn't it? If you can't come yourselves, if you can send somebody else, that would be really helpful. Maybe one of your portfolio holders, because I think it's really quite important that people involved in this discussion at the county level, collective council level.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6. And it's health stroke Bob. And I believe we have Stephen Chandler online with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can I just check you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Kevin, are you able to put the presentation up, please?
Yeah, just bear with me.
Thank you. For those I may not have met before, I'm Stephen Chandler. I'm the Executive Director of People here at Oxfordshire County Council, but I'm also the Chair of the Oxfordshire Place-Based Partnership. Thank you, Kevin. So what I'm going to do in this brief session is just take you through some of the arrangements for health and care here in Oxfordshire, but I'm going to do that in the context of some of the changes that we know have either been decided in the context of the NHS or are going to be coming our way in the context of local government changes. So if you just move on to the next slide, Kevin, please. If you want to, through the chair, pause and ask me any questions as we go through, happy to do it that way or wait till the end, whichever's best for you. So just to start, reminding everybody how we're organised here in Oxfordshire. So we have an integrated care board that covers Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West, Bob, but at the footprint of Oxfordshire County Council, we have the place-based partnership, So that's a combination of organisations that are involved directly or indirectly in the delivery of health and care. So it includes everyone from primary care, so 3 GPs represented, through to the 2 large acute hospital providers, social care in children's, adult, public health, but importantly as well, voluntary sector and some of the organisations that oversee the delivery of health and care, Health Watch. And district councils are represented by Caroline Green, who sits on the place-based partnership on behalf of the districts and city. So it's focused on ensuring health and care is organised and delivered across the Oxfordshire footprint in as strong and positive way as possible. And that includes, in some cases, joining the resources together. And we have in Oxfordshire one of the largest pool budget and joint commissioning arrangements in the country. So there's over £500 million worth of money put together between the NHS and the County Council. It's got a joint commissioning executive that oversees all of the different care that's commissioned in that. And that can be anything from CAMS, mental health, through to care home provision, but also community hospitals and support for people directly in their communities. So that's the here and now. So what's going to be different? Moving on to the next slide, please, Kevin. So we know that change is the only constant. So if you haven't, you'll be talking shortly about local government reorganisation, where we're responding to the government's requirement to replace county and city and district councils by May 2028. We know there's also the agenda of devolution, so creating devolved authorities. You will have heard Baroness Casey mentioned in lots of government activities. Hopefully one of those is the piece of work that she's doing for the government around the future of adult social care. That piece of work is, it was supposed to have started by now, but it's been delayed a little bit by some of the other work she's been doing. But there's a commitment from her and the government to deliver a clear plan for social care by 2028. And certainly you will have heard of the decision earlier this year to abolish NHS England with those functions and responsibilities that need to transferring into the Department of Health and Social Care. That's expected to take 2 years and is supposed to be completed by April 2027. One of the things that we have been really focused on of late is also at the same time there was a decision that all ICBs will have to cut their running costs by 50% by Q3 of this financial year, so by October of this year. So that's not the budget of ICBs, but the running costs, so administration, back office, support services. Clearly, we know, because we've all been involved in redesigning and changing services, that it's really difficult to take 50% of your operating costs out of a system without having a severe impact. And I'll talk a little bit in a moment about some of the things we know about this. But I would have to say to you, I'm probably not going to be able to answer a number of your questions about that because the detail, the guidance, the detail has yet to be provided by the centre. We've also heard in relation to our provider organisations that they've got to reduce their corporate growth by 50%. But in a positive slant, there is the opportunity to reinvest those savings to enhance local services. Again, really good to see that reduction with a reinvestment, but again, not much detail as yet around it. And of course, finally, on this slide, you will have heard the government talk about a clear commitment to publish a 10-year plan. The timescale rather for publishing that is the end of June. I'm hearing it may be delayed, but if it is being delayed, it's only by a matter of weeks rather than anything longer than that. Of course, we know there are going to be 3 key strands to that 10-year plan because they have been well trained and the Secretary of State has been talking to them. they're ones that I don't think any of us would argue about, which is greater emphasis on preventing people becoming ill in the first place. So a movement from treating sickness to preventing illness. It's a move equally from people being treated predominantly in hospitals to being treated much more in their homes and in their communities. And finally, the third strand, moving from analog to digital. So greater use of technology across all of the different spheres of health and care. So let's move on to the next slide. So again, it's often easy to think purely through the lens or through the silo that is our own organization, never mind our own part of that organization. But if you go back to the beginning of this decade, so the early 20s, we'll all remember it for COVID, but also it should be remembered from some very clear policy directives from what was then the Conservative government around integration, around working together, so that public services, particularly NHS and local government in this instance, but not excluding police and the justice system, should work together, that they should become much more person-centered, that they should be working to ensure sustainability. So irrespective of which part of the system you're in, looking at those 6 boxes there, there should be very little argument and debate around that. So again, much emphasis on public health and prevention, ensuring that when people do reach crisis point, that's a really quick, sustainable intervention, that people get good outcomes for the care and support they receive. And of course, that we're doing that in the most efficient and providing the greatest value for money. So again, just a slide to remind people of what it is we're trying to do. So let's move on to the next slide, if you would, Kevin, please. So whilst I said there was little detail as yet around the impact of the 50% reduction, we do know that we do know some of the thinking, because a model integrated care board blueprint was published about 6 weeks ago. Now it has greater emphasis on that strategic responsibility, so that strategic commissioning. You may say, well, what does strategic commissioning look like in comparison to tactical or local commissioning? But this is very much where on a population size of 1 million plus, they're looking at commissioning, rather than how we often do here locally, is commissioning on a sometimes on a county-wide basis, but often on a locality basis. The ICB again, reflecting the 3 priorities, focus on great improvement of health and well-being, but also clearly around ensuring that value for money. So I've worked in the NHS and in local government for all of my career. One of the stark changes I experienced when working in local government was that absolute fixation on ensuring we didn't overspend at year end, and that we lived within our means. There wasn't the same emphasis as I saw it within the NHS. I see behaviour now in the NHS and a focus in the NHS that is very reflective of what I experienced when I first came into local government, i.e. overspending is no longer acceptable, tolerated, or supported. So I think we will see a much more rigorous NHS. We have to be really careful because of how they are going to ensure that those overspends in the past are managed to live within their means. So moving on to the next slide. So this is a table that sort of brings alive what those changes might look like. So on the left, you can see those are some of the functions that the new ICB footprint will focus on. So population health management, right through to user involvement, etc. Through to, on the right, a transfer of some of those responsibilities. Now, really important as you're looking through that list to see that this is a proposal as of yet, because there are some things in there that we, from a local government point of view, are very worried about. So, for example, midway down the table is safeguarding. send. When we ask, what does that mean? How is the NHS going to ensure that they continue to contribute to safeguarding activities, send support? That detail has not yet been even considered or worked through. So those are some of the things that we are engaging
Can I
with the
ask
IC.
you a question there, Stephen?
Of course.
One of the things that a red flag that comes up early in your presentation was the need to save 50% of the admin budget. Is the plan to save 50% by transferring things over to other people? Because otherwise I'm at a loss as to how you save 50%.
So there's two publicly talked about proposals at the moment. One of them is to reduce the number of ICBs as a totality. So there's 42 ICBs across the country at the moment. So they are looking at where they can save management costs by mergers and reducing the total number. And some of you may have heard that our Bob is in discussions with Frimley to consider a merger. Those conversations are developing. Whether it's a final decision as yet, I wouldn't want to say, but I've saw emerging documents talk about a new ICB footprint that talks about a Thames Valley footprint, which would include Bob and Frimley. I appreciate Thames Valley is even bigger than that, but that's a starter for that. So that's one. And the second area is the point you raised, David, which is transfer of activities. I've seen the ICB talk about transferring activities to provider trusts. And then I've said, but provider trusts have not always been the most financially stable. Are you going to be able to transfer any resources? The blunt answer has been no. So this is why we are being really, really careful. And this is why I've been talking to the chair of our HOSC, who also is the interim chair of the Bob HOSC, around the scrutiny that they're undertaking around these changes. Unfortunately, because there's no firm proposals as yet, HOSC has not been able to scrutinise because there's been nothing to scrutinise. But yes, that's a real worry. Kevin, could you move on to the next slide? Again, some more iterations of how the conversations are progressing. So which activities would continue to be discharged at that larger ICB level and which would we have at place? You may have heard me mention neighbourhood health. This is one of the strands that the NHS has been working on for probably about 6 to 9 months now, which is around building around GP practices. So all of those things that help the majority of the population remain healthy and well and have a good experience when they become ill. That's one of the priority areas. But again, this is work in progress. I didn't come here today to present the new future. I came here to present the present with some of the challenges and tests that we're doing. The place-based partnership is meeting next Friday, so the 4th of July, where we're going to be workshopping some of these issues and seeing where we think we can offer help and support, or where we think we can do things more effectively, but also where are those red lines that you've pointed at least one of them out. So next slide, please, Kevin. Again, despite ICBs reducing overall and becoming larger, the role and responsibility of place is really, really important. And you in the room will be thinking of place through a variety of different lenses. At the moment, I'm looking at place on an Oxfordshire footprint because that's the current footprint that we describe place in. But I know as part of the local government reorganisation, place and what place means is up for debate, consideration, and may change in the future. Next slide, please. So you will have heard earlier in the presentation talked about ICBs talking about their role as a strategic commissioner. I would also argue that the joint commissioning we do in Oxfordshire has a strategic component of it, but that this is one of the reasons why I've been such a passionate advocate for most of my career around that joint approach to lots of things, including commissioning. We do a lot of joint commissioning in Oxfordshire. It has really delivered improved outcomes, better use of the limited resources that we've got, and it has enabled us to work on some of those really knotty challenges that we as a system have experienced. If you're minded, there was a CQC area review carried out in Oxfordshire in 2017-2018, where it looked at Oxfordshire's health and care system and how it was being led and meeting the needs of its population. It's a pretty salutary read in relation to what CQC found. They found that there was very little join up, that our plans were not working together, that we didn't have operational efficiencies, that our processes and therefore the outcomes as a result of those processes were not good. We are so far beyond that now as a result of the work we've done together at that footprint. So let's move on, get quickly to the end for some more conversation. I just wanted to finish by just showing a few examples of where strong place-based partnerships work around the country. So you can see there's a whole range from north to south. On to the next slide, please, Kevin. So there in the West Yorkshire, again, trying to find a rural geography with some strong urban examples. You can see there a number of the facets of that partnership, strong partnership across key elements, NHS, councils, VCS, Health Watch, academic institutions, how they measure their impact, strategies, meaningful community engagement, really strong public involvement and strong community voice, real culture of collaboration. And yet they're able to do that on a footprint of 2.4 million. So one of the debates and discussions we've been having with the ICB is, as it gets bigger, how is it going to replicate some of the successes that we see across the country? Move on, Kevin, because some other examples I just wanted to include. Again, there's facets, mature, deep integration, ambitious for its population, really great use of population data to focus activities on those areas that have the greatest impact. Move on to the next example. So those of us that have been looking at integration and devolution for a long time will be aware of Greater Manchester, the first real opportunity to look across multiple organisations on the footprint with a focus on health and well-being. So having been and evaluated some of the work in Manchester, really interesting to see some of the changes they've made. You don't need me to tell you this, but I'll just say it anyway. It takes quite some time to make the changes to long-term health and well-being. So you really do have to be, like in West Yorkshire, ambitious for the health and well-being of place. Move on, Kevin, just so as we show some more. So again, South East London, really strong neighbourhood-based partnership, leadership distributed across boroughs and community providers. Again, and this, hopefully you'll have seen a theme here, using population data to both empower decision-making in this example, but in the previous example, to target health and care interventions. You'd hope to see, and I can show you there, responsive, locally tailored care systems, very much building on that neighbourhood health and care model. Move on. I think there's one more before I get to the end. And another example of North East and North Cumbria ICS. So again, large geographical footprint, very complex populations, etc. So again, move on, Kevin. Sorry, you went too fast, but the last slide was just some of the evidence base. So some of the further reading for those of you that want to delve even deeper. So if you take the slides down, Kevin, then I can see people and we can have a little bit more of a conversation.
Yes, thanks for that. And I'm going to ask Kevin to circulate those slides if that's okay, because some of them were a real test for the very vocals. But Does anyone have any questions for Stephen before we?
So it's not a
Susan.
question, it's just to note my declaration of interest, which should be on the records, that I'm employed by the NHS, specifically by Oxford University Hospitals, which was mentioned in the post presentation, and as I said, just to make sure I think I thought.
Any questions for?
Yeah, Stephen, I just wanted to ask about the future of our own ICB. I mean, some of the ones you've mentioned have got a much bigger footprint than we have, I think. And you mentioned Frimley, but I mean, there has been some talk about increasing the size of some of the ICBs. I just wonder whether you've got any sense that is likely to happen in this area beyond the Thames Valley.
At the moment, the only information I'm hearing is the bit that includes joining up with Frimley. But I have heard conversations that have talked about a halving of the total number of ICBs, so going from 42 to 21. But I have equally heard a really a real reduction to up to 10 ICBs. I think at the moment we know about Frimley, we don't know anything more than that. Personally, I think they will have to go even further if they're going to deliver sustainable and equitable services.
And what do you think would happen? How do you think that would affect us in terms of the place-based partnership and what we're currently doing in Oxfordshire? Do you get a sense that might change as well?
I think it will change. It clearly will have to change because some of those responsibilities and activities that the ICB do, they'll no longer be doing. It'll either go to NHS England or it'll be delegated to an NHS provider or some other arrangement, which is the point I was making around the workshop next week, where we're wanting to look at what is the opportunity for Oxfordshire as a place. And I take the point about, well, that place might change, but Caroline and I have had some conversations around how would we maintain the value that comes from some of the scale associated with joint commissioning, whilst reflecting if should there be a 2 or 3 unitary model. I think we'd want to look at that. I think having worked for as long as I have in this system, I think the greater local control and influence you have, the better. So I would want to be arguing that we look to retain in Oxfordshire as much of the control, the autonomy, the oversight as is possible. So I've just stepped out of the Send Improvement Board to do this presentation. And before that, we were talking to the ICB as to whether we might in Oxfordshire take one of the key Send Improvement resources from the ICB to be managed here in Oxfordshire as part of that. They were supportive of that. And I think that's where we've not got to wait to be told what's going to happen to us, but rather to say, we think from an Oxfordshire point of view, this is what we can do to help.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Steve, come back to the community. Thanks, Stephen. That was really useful. I think there's a health warning with that presentation, isn't there? That this is where we're at now, but it might not be where we are in a week's time or a month's time.
Absolutely. And the only thing I would say, I would encourage you to talk to your reps on the HOSC and certainly on the Bob HOSC to be asking those questions around when are the changes coming and what are those changes going to be and can we scrutinise them?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Stephen. If we move on to item 7, which is to appoint people to a couple of outside bodies. The first one is England's Economic Heartland, which I'm currently the representative on. If we could have a nomination handy.
Those councillor Bethia, please.
Nomination for Bethia, seconded by Liz. Are there any further nominations? In which case, is everyone in favour of Bethia? That general nodding. Thank you. And the other one is also replacing me on the Local Nature Partnership. And I'm going to recommend Anna Railton, who's the Deputy Leader of Oxford City Council, who has been their representative on the Environment Advisory Group. To be the person on that. If I propose that, would Bethany would like seconds? Do we have any other nominations? In which case, is everyone happy that we put Emma to that? Again, nodding on memory. Item 8, Enterprise Oxfordshire update, and we have Robin Rogers is here and making his way to the day. And to you, Robin.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. So just a brief recap of where we are and where we come from. So Enterprise Oxfordshire, formerly known as Oxlet.
I suspect someone's going to tell me to ask you to speak up, if that's okay.
Oh, apologies. Try more. So just a recap of where we've come from, because it's so close. Where we've come from and the background. Enterprise Oxfordshire, formerly Oxlet, whereas Oxfordshire's local enterprise partnership and has been delivering economic development services for the last 10 to 15 years. Following change in government guidance around the support for LEPs and the withdrawal for financial support for LEPs, those responsibilities transferred in the case of Oxfordshire to the County Council as of 1st of April 2024. And at that point, the ownership structure of the company transferred from being owned by those members of the board who were broadly public sector and business partners into the ownership of the County Council. That process happened on the 1st of April 2024 with a new board appointed from December 2024, and then to signal that change, a new name and a branding implemented from April 2025 with a new business plan in place. Broadly, the functions of Enterprise Oxfordshire continue as those of Oxlet in terms of delivering support on skills, business support and inward investment. The significant change in line with government guidance is and the choices that County Council's Cabinet made was to put the development of economic strategy into the world of County Council's Cabinet, clearly in consultation and engagement with stakeholders across the county. So we've been putting in place the resources and then the engagement structures, and I'll move on to and what the policy landscape will need to look like for that. Enterprise Oxford itself has developed a new business plan approved by its board and the County Council Shareholder Committee. It's absorbed increased costs without additional budget. It has faced some staffing challenges over recent months, which they are absorbing. We're in the process of recruiting an independent chair. That process is no compliant recruitment process, which went out to advert. We're going through a appointment process, including engagement with stakeholders over the next month to 6 weeks. The broader context then is how the county system responds, leads, engages with shifting government economic strategy and expectations and resources around economic development. I'm sure this is something we want to discuss around this table extensively. We're absorbing just today the launch of the 10-year infrastructure strategy and the modern industrial strategy. Less recently, although not that long ago, we've engaged, as we'll hear in a minute, around the Oxford-Cambridge work, the Oxfordshire Growth Commission, publication of the English Devolution White Paper, as well as updates to the National Planning Policy Framework and our local ambitions and policy around health equity, economic equity, and inclusive economic development. So all of that context sets against the existing strategic economic plan, which was approved by the local enterprise partnership but not supported by several of councils in Oxfordshire. That means there is a need for us to revisit what our shared economic strategy looks like. We are in the process of considering absorbing the new guidance published again just yesterday on local growth plans. Local growth plan guidance is aimed at this point at mayoral authorities, but we're considering whether that's appropriate, useful model of what Oxfordshire strategic economic plans should look like. whether that's a useful way to engage or whether there's another more appropriate model. Again, engaging with stakeholders and new bodies like the Growth Commission to look at what that should be. And we expect to do that over the summer into the autumn. So I'll pause there. Take any questions, please.
Any questions from anyone? Standard one in silence.
I think I have got a question
Andy.
because I've been pondering it for a while, really. And I just wanted to kind of understand governance-wise how the Oxfordshire leaders can actually feed in to the works that is now undertaken through the new arrangements. And it would be useful because, in a sense, previously, at least we had some involvement within it. And I kind of feel, I just wanted to know if that is the intention. And if so, can we actually look at a mechanism that will be useful so that we get this feeding in two-way traffic, which at the end of the day, we want it to succeed within the new government's arrangements, but equally we want to influence where we can. So I just kind of wanted to open that up and ask you where we are with that.
Shall I take Susan's question as well?
Yeah.
Mine very much follows on from that, and very much along the same lines. I was going to ask whether stakeholders in relation to the independent chair included district council, district city council leaders, because I think it'd be good if it did, but I'd also like to know who the stakeholders are. And secondly, I mean, I think sort of where Andy's question was coming from is sort of where I am, which is feeling very disconnected now from Enterprise Oxfordshire, and that's exactly what I feared might happen with the changes that were proposed. And I think that's regrettable because we have the relationship with businesses that sits with the district councils at the moment, and so yeah, I'm finding it a little bit tricky, and so I welcome any response you can give about how we can be a bit more engaged.
So I think there's two sides to that. So there's economic strategy development, which was quite a substantial element of what leaders were engaged with through Enterprise Oxfordshire Board, and that engagement, I think, as a small partnership mechanism we'd expect to bring here, as the county council engaging here. Then there's the operational delivery of what Enterprise Oxfordshire does, which I appreciate there's a shift as you're not sitting on the board at the moment, so you don't see that. We need to, across stakeholders, to make sure we're showing that what is showing what's happening. I hope, and we'll need to ensure that we are that Enterprise Oxfordshire continues to engage operationally with the economic development leads with those managers. How we then make sure there's visibility of the work of the kind of delivery unit as well as engagement on strategy, so we need to work on.
And specifically the stakeholder engagement.
Oh, the stakeholder engagement. Yes, we asked for invites to go to leaders. I'll check where that is. We've looked at, in terms of other stakeholders, we've looked at some of the previous board members who will be forming the core of the advisory board into the council that we've discussed here previously. And then we have options to look at who else comes into that advisory board. But that's principally around, again, economic strategy and business voice.
Okay. Anyone else?
Oh no. It's covered enough.
Thanks, Robin. I'll move on to item 9. Not unconnected, I'm sure. The Oxford Growth Commission. Susan, I believe you were going to do us a quick update on that.
So they give a quick update because although both Liz and I sit on it, Liz had to, unfortunately, the first meeting coincided with county cabinet, something that will be taken into account in future meetings that won't happen again. That was promised. So, so just a few sort of things to say, really, and loosely speaking, I'm basing my comments on the report that Neil Coleman gave to us at that Growth Commission meeting. So he was appointed on the 12th of May. So I think actually having our first meeting on the 17th of June is actually pretty good progress. He's got a small team of people supporting him currently, and they're drawn from MHCLG, City and County Councils, Homes England and Oxford University. As people will be aware, the Commission was tasked to examine how best to unlock and accelerate growth in Oxford and the surrounding area, working with central and local partners to maximise the benefits of growth to the local area and to the UK as a whole. Its terms of reference set out objectives to be delivered in 5 work streams: transport and connectivity, infrastructure, housing delivery and regeneration, innovation, skills and employability, and innovative financing and investment. The membership obviously includes Liz, myself, and Martin and Caroline, but also membership from 2 universities, Advanced Oxford, Homes England, and an independent advisor. I think just to sort of like set out the kind of work of the Commission, Neil's appointment is for an initial period of 18 months, but the Commission is expected to produce an interim report in the autumn, with a final report in 18 months' time. And the interim report will set out any immediate findings and priorities for investment, as well as a list of actions that are being taken with partners and broad directions for the final report. The Commission will meet approximately every 2 months, and I think we spent actually an awful lot of time in that first meeting talking very specifically about inclusivity. It was a really important part of our discussions. We wanted to make sure that it was embedded in everything that we did. There was quite a lot of reference back to the OIEP, just so that people don't think that we're reinventing the wheel. We wanted to make sure that those links were in place as well. And you know, this is very much about making sure that the infrastructure is there to support the growth that is happening. So, you know, the sorts of things that will be sort of priorities, I've sort of touched on it in terms of the work streams, but obviously the big sort of transport investments, making sure they happen to the latest timetable. I think is probably the best I can say on things like the Botley Road. But wastewater and Thames water, both in terms of both sewage and freshwater supplies, I mean, as everybody knows, these have been really huge issues. So that's obviously part of the work, trying to make sure that those actually stay on time and target. We've all been aware of the problems with the grid, and they're expecting everybody. And again, you know, it's trying to sort of unpick some of those really big issues. And it's the work of the Commission is both to bring partners together locally around the table to sort of try and make sure that those are resolved locally if possible. But if there are blockages that can be helped by government, then we have the links into government through the MHCLG representatives, but also through the links through to the Oxford Cambridge growth corridor to try and help unstick some of those problems. And that might be specifically for local issues, but it might also be that we're identifying problems here which need national solutions for everybody. And I think that's very much part of the Commission's work. So, you know, where there are issues that government needs to sort out because it's the impact of government policies or the lack of them, either way, then that is also something that we can and will be raising with government. So I think that's probably all I can say for the first meeting, but I'm very happy to answer any questions if people have got any.
Liz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a couple of things to add really. I think one of the things that I'm very pleased about is Susan just went through 5 work streams that the Growth Commission are looking at. And I think it's really very encouraging that transport and connectivity is top of that list, and housing is on that list as well. Because it's not just about housing, it's about affordable housing. I think we need to make that point very clearly. And I think in all the conversations that we've had in Neil Coleman, and there have been several now, I think it's very clear that he understands this is not just about the city, this is very much about the county. And one of the things that he did mention in his report, which I think is quite important, is an idea that's been proposed by GWR, which they call the Oxfordshire Green Metro. And that really brings together transport around the whole of the county and makes it possible for people to connect across the county, which I think is something we really do need. And I'm very pleased that we picked that up. Now, whether it actually comes to fruition, it certainly won't come to fruition within the 18 months time frame that he's got. But the point is, I think he's looking for deliverables within that 18-month time frame, quick wins, but also some of the longer term proposals that need to go forward for the future. So I think that's quite an encouraging aspect of what's going on here. It's also, I think, very encouraging, and I think this comes back to the question that Helen Marshall asked earlier about a siloed approach. Actually, what they seem to be taking is the opposite approach, because they're bringing in people from different government departments. So in some of the previous meetings that we've had people from DFT, we've had people from Treasury and MHCLG all present in the room. And I think that's quite important too, because it means that there's going to be a sort of cross-government approach to this. And the same, by the way, is true with the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. It's a very different approach from one we've seen in the past. So I think it's worth just adding that to what Susan said.
Sorry, there's one other point I should have mentioned, which is that Neil was very keen to say that he'd had good meetings with all the leaders of the district councils, and that he was very pleased to have had those. And I know he's already been out to visit various different places, including Hayford Park and Begbrook. But also that he wants to come and meet all of the district council leaders in their place, to get kind of have a better understanding of the issues and so on, and you can show off bits. So I think that's definitely something that he's got sort of planned for the next couple of months. So I should have passed that on as well. Sorry.
If you've already shown him a sewage treatment plant, I would take him to one.
I've not personally, but I imagine somebody has.
Yeah, the area that I'm glad you were saying there was an emphasis on was on the inclusive economy, because whether this is a success for me is around what it does for people who don't have physics PhDs, and how growth works for them as well.
We spent a lot of time talking about that. We spent a lot of time talking about skills and the existing population and how they would benefit from this, and specifically some of the barriers to affordable housing as well. That was really important.
Thank you for that. We rattle on to item 10. Kevin and Andrew, you're up. Forward plan.
Yeah, shall I just start briefly? Just to flag for the next meeting, there is an item referenced on there, expecting a funding bid from ZCOP, the Zero Carbon Oxfordshire Partnership, for a bit of consultancy work. Just flagging, we're expecting two other funding bids for other bits of partnership working, one from the Local Nature Partnership, which will be to extend the work on green finance that Ariane referenced earlier on, and we covered at 100 Year Conference, and one which I think some of you are aware of already from the Inclusive Economy Partnership, specifically around the Oxfordshire Anchor network. So I'm expecting three funding bids to come forward against what remains in the Housing Growth Capacity Fund. So sneak preview for July.
I think that's important that we look at those together, because when we're allocating, the money is running out. I think it's right to say. So when we're allocating, we need to look at the different proposals alongside each other and say which ones it is that we do want to fund. So that's one item. The other thing, which I don't think is on there, but we have suggested that at some point we should invite Neil Coleman.
That was the other thing I meant to say. I'm so sorry, Jess. He said that he would be more than happy to come and attend regularly if we want him to. He just couldn't make this particular meeting. Yeah.
Subject to diary commitments.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just to say, I understand it is in his diary for the July meeting. I've been talking to the team.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd want to say on the forward plan? Case, we move on to item 11, which is update on matters relevant to this committee. Does anybody have any updates not relevant to us? There's one issue that I would raise, which is given the work we're doing on devolution, whether we should be inviting our opposite member from the Berkshire. equivalent committee to come regularly to this and offer up one of our members as a sacrifice to attend their meetings. Does that seem like a good idea? Yeah, yeah, there's a tradition of offering hostages, isn't there?
Just to say, Chair, I think I originally said that the Berkshire leaders invited us to go, or me to go to their meeting on the 21st, but they've had to cancel that and move to another date. So that's an informal meeting. I don't know whether you want to invite me to this meeting or to one of our more informal meetings, but I'd be very happy either way.
Shall we take that conversation offline with them to see what they would like to do? But I think in the interest of openness and inclusion, and we are working more often and more closely with them, that it would seem a good idea. General nodding that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Item 12, which is verbal updates from strategic partnerships. The one I've got listed is the EEH meeting, which I attended online, but I think Councillor Lackman was in the room and chairing.
I was, absolutely.
You'd
Yes.
like to kick off?
Yes, sure. Well, there was quite a big change of membership actually owing to the last round of elections in May, where I think there was only one member who I think there's only one member, i.e. myself, who's been at those meetings before, and you, of course, David. I think everybody else is a new leader, actually. Although I've said the leader from Buckinghamshire had attended the previous meetings, he didn't come as capacity as leader previously. So it was actually a very interesting meeting in many respects. We had two main items on the agenda. Oh, the first of which, of course, was the we had half an hour with Patrick Balance, Lord Balance, who is, of course, the chair of the Oxford Cambridge corridor. I think his title is chair. Anyway, he was there, and he gave us an update as to where they've got to. And I would say that it's very similar in many respects to what we've just heard about the Growth Commission. A lot of work going on with particularly the Arts Universities group and the super cluster. So very much focused on the need for development in those areas specifically. So not as much conversation going on around things like skills or housing at the moment. But he does see East-West Rail as being fundamental to the development of the corridor. If you like, that is the spine of the whole corridor. And if that can be got right, then the rest can be got right. I think in previous conversations with him, I've been very clear with him, so I think although East-West Rail is important, it's actually what goes on around East-West Rail that is even more important, because you can't get people to the station unless you've got forms of transport for them to be able to access the nearest station. So that's all something that's very much at the front and centre of his mind normally with this. We have invited him to a meeting on the, I'm just trying to remember what date it is. It's October, and I don't think I've got it on the agenda here, but there's an October Leaders Summit that's going to be happening in the EH region. The intention of that meeting is to include all of the leaders of the strategic transport councils, so in other words, the county councils and the unitary councils across the region, so that there is elected representation when it comes to a discussion around what the corridor and development of the corridor should look like. We will be inviting Patrick Balance and his team to come to that meeting on I think it's the 11th of October. But anyway, that invitation will go out now to Bethia as our representative on EH, as well as myself being present there. The other two things on the agenda which are worth noting are, first of all, a presentation from the officers about their Centre of Excellence, the programme that they have for providing data, particularly to member councils. And they've done some quite interesting interactive maps and things so that you can actually plot things like where HGVs are going, what the land use is relative to transport needs, etc. So there's all of that going on in EH, and obviously that's open to all of our officers to use in making their own decisions around any strategic planning that might be needed. And also the other thing on the agenda, which was really important, was the business plan for the year. And we have taken on as EH some of the responsibilities of the former pan-regional partnership. And so we are working, and we're working with the combined authority in Cambridge and Peterborough on making sure the data that was collected as part of the pan-regional partnership doesn't get lost, but actually gets utilised across the whole of the corridor. So those are the key things really that I have to report on EH. There's a lot of work going on actually among the officers, and it's really very helpful. And of course, you know, we've now got funding agreed for East West Rail, which is going to make a big difference. And so some of the discussions that will be coming up in future is how we plan the legacy for all of that and ensure that there is proper connectivity throughout the whole of the region into East West Rail. However, I have to say one other thing on that, which is that our approach to East West Rail is rather different from the approach at the other end, because from our perspective, it's quite straightforward. EWR will come into Oxford and possibly down to Didcot, turn around and go out again, and our half of the line will be open later on in this year. It's very different in other parts of the corridor. Places like Bedford have got real issues around where the stations are going to go, where the line is going to go, and the same goes for the Cambridge end of the line. So there's a lot of work still to be done to make sure that comes on stream within the timetable that they've planned. But certainly there's no reason why this end of the line shouldn't open fairly soon.
Yeah, I've added a couple of things. One, do with East West Rail. You know, there was a lady from Bedford, wasn't there, who was very passionate about the fact that some houses will have to be demolished to make way for. Yeah, RMP, who's on the Transport Select Committee, was at a picnic I was at this weekend. He's deeply sceptical about East West Rail's technology that they're going to use, because it's not going to be electrified the whole way across. And he was making the point that countries across the world, we would imagine, are very poor and manage to do an electrified railway. And yet this is going to rely on diesel batteries and whatever. Diesel hand batteries. And the other thing I took away was from what Lord Valens was saying about the nature of the corridor, that there are, he said that there were shiny things at each end, where Oxford and Cambridge are actually doing all right in terms of attracting inward investment but his main concern appeared to be the bit in the middle. And the capacity there that there was for growth and the help that would require. So that was an interesting takeaway from that, because there's the problem of creating growth and there's the problem of handling growth. And Oxford and Cambridge ends of the arc have got the problem of handling growth, whereas the ones in the middle have got the problem of generating it. It was interesting that he called that out. I think it was a thing. If there's nothing else on that, item 13 is date of the next meeting, which is the 29th of July. I've been back from my holidays by then. In which case, I'll close the meeting. Thank you, gentlemen. I can